Welcome back. Let's read about this aircraft.
Martin B-57 Canberra. Our B-57 redirects here. For specific variants of the aircraft, see Martin RB-57D Canberra and Martin / General Dynamics RB-57F Canberra. For the Swedish anti-tank weapon, see law. The Martin B-57 Canberra is an American-built, twin-engine tactical bomber and reconnaissance aircraft that entered service with the United States Air Force, USAF, in 1953. The B-57 is a license-built version of the British English Electric Canberra, manufactured by the Glen L. Martin Company. Initial Martin build models were virtually identical to their British-built twinjet counterparts. Martin later modified the design to incorporate larger quantities of US-sourced components and produced the aircraft in several variants. The B-57 Canberra holds the distinction of being the first jet bomber in US service to drop bombs during combat. The Canberra was used extensively during the Vietnam War in a bombing capacity. Specialized versions of the type were also produced and served as high-altitude aerial reconnaissance platforms, the Martin RB-57D Canberra, and as electronic warfare aircraft. The B-57 Canberra was also sold to export customers abroad. Further combat use was seen by the Pakistani Air Force during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965 and the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. In 1983, the USAF opted to retire the type. The B-57 Canberra's retirement marked the ending of the era of the tactical bomber. The three remaining flight-worthy WB-57Fs are technically assigned to the NASA Johnson Space Center, next to Ellington Field in Houston, as high-altitude scientific research aircraft but have also been used for testing and electronic communications in the US and Afghanistan. Development, edit. Origins, edit. At the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950, the USAF found itself in dire need of an all-weather interdiction aircraft. The existing inventory of piston-engine Douglas B-26 Invaders had been dispatched in this capacity at the very start of the conflict. Within a few months in the theater, the B-26 had suffered a very high rate of attrition and successes with the type were typically limited. The USAF requested that the British government provide a private demonstration of the English Electric Canberra, a newly developed jet-powered bomber. On the 17th of August, 1950, the Canberra demonstration was performed at RAF Burtonwood in Warrington, Cheshire, England. During the following month, a team of US test pilots and engineers visited English Electric's Wharton factory to perform a series of flight tests and a detailed technical assessment of the aircraft. On the 16th of September, 1950, the USAF formally issued a request for a jet-powered bomber. The sought aircraft had to possess a top speed of 630 miles per hour, 1,010 kilometers per hour, ceiling of 40,000 feet, 12,000 m, and range of 1,150 mi, 1,850 kilometers. For all-weather capability and a secondary reconnaissance role also had to be included in the design. The American contenders included the Martin XB-51, the North American B-45 Tornado and Savage. To expedite the process, only projects based on existing aircraft were considered and unusually, the service considered foreign aircraft. These included the Canadian Avro Canada CF-100 and the Canberra, which had not yet officially entered service with the Royal Air Force, RAF. Aviation authors Bill Guston and Peter Gilchrist commented that it seems likely that this first batch of trials convinced the Americans that the Canberra was ideal for the job, but in order to satisfy the US Senate a competitive evaluation of all likely contenders had to be arranged. As part of the USAF's evaluation process, All 5 aircraft were submitted to a series of fly-offs to determine their performance. On the 21st of February 1951, a Canberra B.2 WD-932, flown by Roland Beaumont, made the transatlantic journey, arriving in the United States to participate in the competition. By making this journey, the Canberra became the first jet aircraft to perform a non-stop unrefueled flight across the Atlantic Ocean, traveling from Wharton, England, to Gander, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, in the record time of 4 hours 37 minutes. On the 26th of February 1951, the fly-off took place at Andrews Field, Prince George's County, Maryland. Each aircraft was tasked with performing a set sequence of maneuvers within a 10-minute window, directly demonstrating its agility and performance against its rivals. According to Guston and Gilchrist, the Canberra proved to be significantly superior to any of the competing aircraft, and its selection was beyond doubt by the end of the competition. Production arrangements, edit. The Canberra was a foreign aircraft, which meant its superiority in terms of performance did not guarantee political support in spite of the urgent need, particularly in light of there being several rival indigenous aircraft designs. There were also doubts about production availability, with English Electric being able to mesh with USAF demands, as well as questions over spare parts. In March 1951, many of these questions were answered, with production lines already at full capacity meeting Royal Air Force orders and those emerging from other export customers. English Electric entered into discussions with Glenn L. Martin Company. It was proposed that Martin would receive a license to build the Canberra in the United States. According to Guston and Gilchrist, the Americanization of the Canberra program proved effective at dismissing much of the political opposition to the project. The British-built Canberra B.2 that was used as a pattern and prototype for the B-57. On the 23rd of March 1951, the USAF issued a contract to Martin, requesting the manufacturing of an initial quantity of 250 Canberras, which had received the USAF designation B-57. Martin internally designated the type as the Model 272. On the 3rd of April 1951, English Electric and Martin both signed a formal licensing agreement to cover the Canberra's production. During August 1951, a second British-built Canberra, WD-940, was flown to the US to act as a pattern aircraft for Martin, as well as to perform assorted trials and to support performance validation of airframe changes. On the 21st of December 1951, one of the British pattern aircraft, WD-932, was lost in an accident, although this was subsequently discovered to be caused by incorrect fuel scheduling, having led to the tail-heavy aircraft exceeding its design limits during a maneuver. The crash jeopardized the entire program and invigorated the anti-Canberra political opposition. The crash did lead to some design changes in the face of political pressure, but these were not implemented on the first 75 aircraft to be produced. Due to the great urgency placed on delivering the B-57 at Canberra, the initial phase of manufacturing performed by Martin used a minimum change formula to expedite production. Thus the first B-57s to be produced were largely identical to the Canberra B.2. As such, more than 30 changes that had been requested by the Wright Air Development Center, WADC, were rejected on program schedule or cost grounds. One noticeable exception was the adoption of more powerful Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire engines capable of producing 7,200 lbf, 32 kN, of thrust, which were license-built in the United States as the Wright J65. The Sapphire-based J-65 power plant had been selected in place of the British-built Canberra's Rolls-Royce Avons, as the USAF had placed an emphasis on operations within hot climates and intended to fly at a slightly higher maximum gross weight than the RAF's operating practices. Several other minor differences were also present between early US-built and UK-built Canberras. These changes included the canopy and fuselage windows being slightly revised, the crew being reduced from 3 to 2, the adoption of wingtip fuel tanks, engine nacelles were modified with additional cooling scoops, and the conventional clamshell bomb bay doors were replaced with a low-drag rotating door originally designed for the B-51. As a result of these changes, the bomb bay of the US-built aircraft was slightly smaller than its UK-built counterparts in order to allow the American aircraft to carry more fuel. However, the overall external shape of the Canberra remained unchanged. In early July 1953, the first US-built production aircraft, 52-1418, rolled out. It conducted its maiden flight on the 20th of July 1953. 1 month later, this initial production aircraft was accepted by the USAF, by which point a cessation of hostilities had come into effect in Korea. This was one of only 8 B-57 Canberras to be manufactured. The remaining 67 aircraft from this first batch, deemed no longer to be required as bombers, were converted on the assembly line to serve as medium-altitude reconnaissance aircraft while retaining all the basic Canberra features, and were accordingly redesignated as the B-57 Canberra. Further development, edit. In place of the curtailed B-57O, a more refined bomber variant, the B-57B, was developed. Having a more lengthy development time, this model incorporated the structural and system changes that had been recommended by WADC, which resulted in the aircraft being more adaptable than its B-57 predecessor. Of the external changes, the most significant was the adoption of a fighter-style canopy accompanied by a flat-panel windshield and a tandem seating arrangement, providing for greater transparency and an improved view for both the pilot and navigator, as well as allowing for a gun sight to be equipped. The corresponding glazed bombing nose of the B-57 was deleted along with the starboard crew entrance to the cockpit. The B-57B introduced several other major changes. In terms of armaments, a total of 4 hardpoints attached to the outer wing panels were installed on this variant, capable of mounting external bombs and rockets. The B-57B was also furnished with a gun armament for strafing attacks. The first 90 aircraft to be produced were equipped with a total of 8 0.50 caliber, 12.7 mm, Browning machine guns installed within the wings. On later aircraft these were replaced by an arrangement of 4 20 mm M39 cannon. A new rotary bomb door was adopted on the B-57B, which had originally been designed for the XB-51, replacing the hinged doors. This proved to be faster to open forward/close and reduced buffeting, which in turn improved accuracy and allowed for faster attack speeds. The redesigned bomb bay also enabled faster turnaround times on the ground. In addition, hydraulically operated triangular air brakes were installed on the rear fuselage, which worked in addition to the existing finger-type brakes installed in the wings. The new brakes gave the pilots a greater level of controllability, improving the accuracy of low-level bombing runs. The B-57B was equipped with an APW-11 bombing air radar guidance system for target approach guidance, as well as an APS-54 radar warning receiver. The engines were also furnished with a new cartridge starting system, eliminating the reliance on ground start carts. The substantial design changes between the B-57A and B-57B models resulted in delays to the overall program, as well as incurring substantial costs on the fixed-price contract. Guston and Gilchrist stated of the consequences to the program, "This was clearly not the manufacturer's fault, but the money effectively ran out after 177 of the planned 250 aircraft order had been completed." In 1954, in response to the sound performance offered by the B-57B, the USAF elected to place a large second order. This included a further 100 B-57B bombers, 38 B-57C trainers, and 20 RB-57D high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. In 1955, a final batch of 68 B-57E target tugs was ordered. In 1969, in response to demands for a capable night interdiction aircraft for combat operations in Southeast Asia, a total of 16 B-57B Canberras were substantially rebuilt during a lengthy upgrade program. These aircraft received an entirely new nose section containing an AN/ANQ-139 forward-looking radar, a low-light television system, and an AN/AAS-26 forward-looking infrared detector. A laser rangefinder forward/designator was also installed, and the wing pylons modified to accommodate laser-guided paveway bombs, while all the guns were removed to save weight. During the production run from 1953 to 1957, a total of 403 B-57s were built. Operational history, edit. The B-57 was not considered combat-ready by the USAF, and the aircraft were used solely for testing and development. One of the aircraft was given to the U.S. Weather Bureau, which fitted it with a new nose radome and used it to track hurricanes. The aircraft was placed into limited production. Particularly contentious were the cockpit arrangement and the lack of guns, the Canberra having been designed as a high-speed, high-altitude bomber rather than for close air support. The definitive B-57B, which introduced numerous improvements, made its first flight on the 18th of June, 1954. The aircraft initially suffered from the same engine malfunctions as the RB-57s, and several were lost in high-speed low-level operations due to a faulty tailplane actuator which caused the aircraft to dive into the ground. The USAF came to consider the B-57B as being inadequate for the night intruder role, and thus Martin put all aircraft through an extensive avionics upgrade in response. Regardless, by the end of 1957, the USAF tactical squadrons were being re-equipped with supersonic North American F-100 Super Sabres. The complete retirement was delayed, however, by the start of the Vietnam War. Reconnaissance and Electronic Warfare B-57s, edit. See also, 7470th Support Squadron, Martin RB-57D Canberra, and Martin RB-57F Canberra. While the USAF found the B-57 lacking, the photo reconnaissance RB-57 saw some operational use. First flying in October 1953, RB-57 has fully equipped the 363rd Tactical Reconnaissance Wing at Shaw Air Force Base by July 1954. The aircraft were also deployed with USAF squadrons in West Germany, France and Japan. However, operational readiness was poor, and the aircraft suffered from significant production delays because of engine problems. Wright had subcontracted production of J-65 engines to BIC, which resulted in slow deliveries and a tendency for engine oil to enter the bleed air system, filling the cockpit with smoke. The problems were ameliorated when Wright took over engine production in 1954. RB-57 has also suffered from a high accident rate caused in part by poor single-engine handling. This resulted in the entire fleet spending much of 1955 on the ground. By 1958, all RB-57 aircraft were replaced in active service by the Douglas RB-66B and McDonnell RF-1010. Air National Guard, ANG. units extensively used the RB-57 for photographic surveys of the United States until 1971. A number of modified RB-57s were used by the 7499 th support group at Wiesbaden AB, West Germany in Operation Heartthrob reconnaissance missions over Europe. 10 aircraft were pulled off Martin's production line and modifications were performed in August 1955 by the Wright Air Development Center and by Martin. All equipment not absolutely essential for the daytime photography role was eliminated. The bomb bay door was removed and the area was skinned over. The seat for the system operator /navigator was removed, and an optical viewfinder was installed in the nose so that the pilot could perform all the reconnaissance duties without the assistance of the navigator. The clear plexiglass nose cone was replaced by an opaque fiberglass cone, but with a small optical glass window cut for the viewfinder. The plane's J-65BW5S were replaced by higher thrust J-65W7S. The aircraft was referred to as RB-57-01. The weight reduction program shaved 5,665 pounds off the weight of the RB-57, and the ceiling was increased by 5,000 feet. 2 RB-57-1s were used by the Republic of China Air Force for reconnaissance missions over China. One was shot down by a Chinese Mikoyan-Gavik MiG-17 on the 18th of February, 1958 and the pilot killed. In 1959, 2 RB-57Ds were delivered to replace the A-types. One of them was shot down over China by a Sa-2 guideline missile, marking the first successful operational engagement of surface-to-air missiles. 2 other RB-57s were used by the Federal Aviation Administration to plan high-altitude airways for the upcoming jet passenger aircraft. Starting in 1959, Martin began to modify retired RB-57s with electronic countermeasures, ECM, equipment in the bomb bay. Redesignated EB-57O, these aircraft were deployed with Defense Systems Evaluation Squadrons which played the role of aggressors to train the friendly air defense units in the art of electronic warfare. Subsequent bomber variants were also modified to fulfill this role. Although initially conducted by active-duty Air Force units, the EB-57 mission eventually migrated to selected ANG units. The ANG's EB-57s were replaced, in the 1980s, by the USAF's more advanced General Dynamics /Grumman F-111, a Raven operated by the active-duty USAF. Strategic Air Command employed 20 RB-57D aircraft from 1956 until 1964. Little is known about their use. The aircraft were retired due to structural fatigue and the advent of the U-2 and SR-71. High Altitude Atmospheric Research WB-57S, edit. Since the early 1970s, 2 WB-57F Canberras, NASA 926 and NASA 928, were flown and maintained by NASA for high-altitude atmospheric research. These same 2 aircraft have also been deployed alternately to Afghanistan for use as communications platforms that fly high over an area linking various communications devices on the battlefield and to other airborne assets. They were known as the Battlefield Airborne Communications Node System, BACN. In 2011 it was determined that a 3rd aircraft was needed to satisfy mission requirements and an additional WB-57 was removed from the 309th AMAG after over 40 years at Davis Monthan AFB and returned to flight status in August 2013 as NASA 927. Vietnam War, edit. Patricia Lynn Project, edit. This section needs additional citations for verification. Please help improve this article by adding citations to reliable sources in this section. Unsourced material may be challenged and removed. February 2024, learn how and when to remove this message. Although intended as a bomber and never before deployed by the USAF to a combat zone, the first B-57s to be deployed to South Vietnam were not operated in an offensive role. The need for additional reconnaissance assets, especially those capable of operating at night, led to the deployment of two RB-57E aircraft on the 15th of April, 1963. The USAF had awarded General Dynamics a contract to modify two B-57s, 55 to 4243, 55 4245, as all-weather high-altitude strategic reconnaissance aircraft. Under Project Patricia Lynn, these aircraft provided infrared coverage using their Reconofax 6 cameras. General Dynamics was chosen to modify the B-57E as it had extensive experience modifying Canberras with the RB-57D and RB-57F projects and turning the B-57 into a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. The forward nose section of the B-57s were modified to house a KA-136-inch forward oblique camera and a low panoramic KA-56 camera used on the Lockheed U-2. Mounted inside the specially configured bomb bay door was a KA-1 vertical camera, a K-477 split vertical day-night camera, an infrared scanner, and a KA-1 left oblique camera. The modified aircraft were redesignated RB-57E. The 2nd Air Division was desperate for tactical intelligence, and on arrival the pilots that ferried in the RB-57s were immediately assigned to the division as combat crews and briefed on missions by divisional intelligence officers on the reconnaissance flights they would make. The first mission was flown on the 7th of May, 1963 by the highly classified Patricia Lynn Squadron, Detachment 1, 33D Tactical Group, later 6250th Combat Support Group, later 460th Tactical Reconnaissance Wing, operating from Tan Son Nhut Air Base. The detachment flew nighttime reconnaissance missions to identify Viet Cong, VC, base camps, small arms factories and storage and training areas. The sorties yielded results that heretofore only had been wished for. The nighttime imagery showed VC training and base camps, small, hidden factories and storage dumps that RF-101 Voodoo crews had flown over during the day and had been unable to locate from the air. The existing RF-101s in 1963 could only photograph a few kilometers. They had to fly very low, per flight with their cameras. The RB-57s could image the whole border with Cambodia in 2.5 flights at 16,000 feet, 4,900 m, to 17,000 feet, 5,200 m, with superior results. From then on, Patricia Lynn crews flew both night and day missions over South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia and areas of North Vietnam until 1971. The RB-57s carried the call sign Moonglow. Some missions were flown at low level over single targets, others consisted of 4-6 specific targets. At night RB-57s flew the canals and rivers in the Mekong Delta and southern part of South Vietnam. The sampans were easy to spot with the real-time IR if the crew could keep over the canal, which was difficult in the darkness. The United States began Operation Steel Tiger over the Laos Panhandle and the Vietnamese Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, on the 3rd of April, 1965, to locate and destroy enemy forces and material being moved southward at night into South Vietnam, and to fly bomb damage assessment reconnaissance runs over targets attacked in the secret war the United States fought there. These flights teamed with B-57B bombers operating out of BNHOA Air Base and AC-130 Hercules flare ship. 3 more aircraft were subsequently modified in 1964/65, bringing the number of aircraft to 5. 2 RB-57s were lost in combat operations. The first, S/N55-4243, was lost as a result of a fuselage fire caused by small arms while on a low-level reconnaissance mission in August 1965. The crew ejected safely when near Tan Son Nhut Air Base. The second aircraft, S/N55-4264, was lost on the 21st of October 1968, after an engine fire started